You are sitting in the dark, surrounded by the chaotic, overwhelming wreckage of a crisis. Your phone screen glows, lighting up with a text from someone who genuinely loves you, asking if you need help. This is the exact moment you need a lifeline. But instead of typing help, you hesitate. You stare at the screen, and you hit the power button. You choose the silence. Society misdiagnoses this retreat into silence. They call it being cold, stubborn, or simply having a bad attitude. That silence is a desperate, primal survival mechanism. Shutting down is a deeply physical, somatic experience. When the weight of a crisis catches up to you, your chest tightens like someone is sitting heavily on your ribs. Your limbs become completely drained, as if your bones are suddenly made of wet concrete. Formulating the words, "I am fine," requires the same metabolic energy as running a marathon. You look at the screen, and your fingers simply will not move. Your nervous system has been hijacked. When the internal circuit gets overloaded by too much pain, your body pulls the plug to conserve its last remaining drops of energy. Emotional flooding triggers a biological freeze state. Imagine your brain as a computer. Suddenly, a crisis hits. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your system. It's like opening 80 massive files simultaneously. The prefrontal cortex completely overloads, redirecting all power to survival. When you approach a person in this paralyzed state with a warm, comforting question, the brain registers it as an unmanageable demand for complex data. Their frozen brain has to suddenly calculate how to articulate their pain while simultaneously managing your active concern for them. It is simply way too much bandwidth to handle. They push you away because their exhausted neurological system requires total, absolute sensory deprivation, just so it can reboot. To understand why a comforting hand registers as a threat, we look backward to avoidant attachment, how the brain first learned to navigate distress. Picture a young child in severe distress, crying out for comfort. Their caregiver is emotionally absent, or chronically heavily overwhelmed, or even actively dismissive, telling them to simply stop crying and deal with it alone. A child's brain is neuroplastic, absorbing data to set the rules of survival. In those lonely moments, it learns that relying on others leads to disappointment. The brain rewires itself, making vulnerability a profound danger. Fast forward 30 years. You are a grown adult facing a devastating life crisis. When a friend reaches out to help, your brain flashes a warning sign. Weakness will be punished. Lock down the system. Rejecting help as an adult is an outdated childhood defense mechanism, operating exactly as it was programmed. Our early childhood experiences are reinforced by a culture that glorifies the lone wolf myth. We worship the relentless grind of hustle culture and the individual who survives against impossible odds. We are taught true resilience is achieved entirely on our own. Society takes emotional isolation, dresses it up in iron armor, and calls it independence. In psychology, we distinguish between guilt and shame. Guilt says, "I did a bad thing," leaving room to repair the error. Shame whispers, "I am a bad thing." Losing a career or a relationship causes a catastrophic drop in core human value. You feel flawed at your core, unlovable and broken. The sufferer locks the door to create a quarantine zone. In their traumatized mind, their depression is a contagion, and they are protecting their friends from the radioactive fallout of their presence. Toxic independence is a silent psychological prison, masquerading as strength. It forces people to bleed out alone in the dark, to avoid staining the hands of those they love. Now let's shift to the perspective of the person standing helplessly on the outside. When you see someone retreat, your immediate instinct is to break the door down and fix the problem. Firing off unsolicited advice or demanding they look on the bright side hands a heavy iron anchor to a nervous system that is already drowning. This frantic urge to fix often serves to soothe the outsider's own anxiety. It places a heavy emotional burden on the sufferer, who must now expend their remaining metabolic energy to reassure you that your help is working. When a crisis destroys your autonomy, you scramble for anything you can still manage. Dictating the distance between yourself and others is the only fraction of power you have left. Pushing you away provides a desperate illusion of control, allowing the traumatized ego to prevent a total psychological collapse. Healing from a biological shutdown is a slow process of nervous system recalibration. It does not happen overnight. Because the freeze response is involuntary, the goal is to practice nervous system regulation. By noticing the physical signals, the tightening chest or the heavy limbs, before the prefrontal cortex fully crashes, you can begin to communicate safety back to the body. This self-awareness allows for tiny, safe moments of vulnerability. You loosen the armor piece by piece, proving to your body through small actions that trust is no longer a metabolic threat. That armor protected you when you needed it most, but true resilience is realizing you finally have the physiological safety to step outside of it.